And we're back. This month celebrates the 10th anniversary of Portland Comic Book Month, and to celebrate, I am reading only comics by local creators and talking about all things local comics. So we're going to start this week by reviewing Wild Weather by M.K. Reed and Jonathan Hill. You may remember M.K. from her book Delver that was released as a Comixology original. But this book is far from fantasy. It talks about climate change, it talks about weather, all sorts of things, and it is dedicated to our very own Matt Zaffino. How cool is that? I also sat down with Jack Kent from Sketchy People to talk about his unique project and his upcoming book release with a very special guest. So without further ado, let's talk comics. Now, Science Comics' Wild Weather took me back to middle school science and had me take several seats. It's written by M.K. Reed and illustrated by Jonathan Hill, two Portland locals. And when I say it took me back to middle school science, I mean that in the nicest way possible. It's like you have all this information percolating in the back of your brain that you learned years ago, but you had long since forgotten it because you'd replaced it with useless adult things like how to make a grocery list and I don't know, other stuff. Like how many times have I needed the information that I got by dissecting a frog? All the information in this book is pretty pertinent and super, super interesting. You learn things about hurricanes. You learn things about tornadoes. You learn how to just look out in the sky and tell what kind of clouds are there and whether or not it's going to rain. You don't even need your iPhone. You'll be the coolest kid at the party. I really enjoyed this book, but it is perfect for middle readers. Storeman Norman Weatherby, the meteorologist at a fictional news station, gets upset when the beautiful but dim-witted anchor doesn't understand the concept of global warming. He thinks just because it's going to snow outside means that there's no such thing as global warming. And Storeman Norman has to set him straight. And as he's setting him straight, the reader gets to learn a bunch about rain and about hail and sleet and all sorts of really, really cool weather things and what it means when these changes happen in the world and how long they've been happening and why they happen and just all those really great curious questions. I think the last time that I found science to be so enlightening and enriching was when I was about the age that this book is targeted at, like middle reader age, like middle school. You know, I just thought that everything about science was so cool. And then by the time I got to high school, it was like, oh, you're like reading things off of a note card. And now I didn't study science in college, so I will give it the benefit of the doubt. But that was the last time I felt truly inspired by it. Like the world was my oyster science-wise, and I just couldn't get enough of it. So I think it's perfect for that aged kid. There are so many people I'd like to recommend Wild Weather to because it was such a genuine joy to read, but I'm going to recommend it to you, internet, adults, kids. If you're an adult who likes science and just wants an easy read, if you have a kid who's interested in science, this is the perfect book for you, and I really recommend that you pick it up. It comes out officially on April 16th, and you can get it most places books are sold, Amazon, Powell's here in town, and other bookstores, so just keep an eye out for it and, you know, support your local artists and writers here in Portland while also learning some really cool stuff about weather that you can definitely pull out to impress people at a moment's notice. Listen, let me let you in on a little secret. If you think I'm freaking out too much over a children's book that is intended to educate children, I don't think you understand the kind of lady that I am, so let me fill you in. I am the sit in the front of the class with multiple colored pens so I can take very organized notes, first one with a hand up in the air, Hermione kind of gal. So that sheds a little bit of light onto why I'm so excited about this book that I think is aimed at children. That's a little bit of an answer for you. It did my academia heart a lot of good. And on to more Portland-centric comics, I sat down with Sketchy People's Jack Kent. Now, I talked about Sketchy People before because year one of this was recommended to me at Floating World Comics, located at 400 Northwest Cooch Street, a couple of weeks ago. And by the way, I didn't get to go to Floating World this week, so if you could stop by and tell them I said, hey, I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, when I read it and I reviewed it and I loved it so much, so I reached out to Jack and lo and behold, this year 3 book is coming out soon. So he sat down to talk with me about it, and I'm gonna let him tell you about it because he could probably do it better.
Sketchy People is a comic that I do to celebrate diversity in the fine city of Portland. I will draw somebody, whether if they're wearing something silly, doing something crazy. It's all a crazy amalgamation of a few different variables. So it's basically, if it causes you to do a double take, that might check the box of sketchy, and that's kind of what I look for. Sometimes it's a moment where I'll just kind of store it going, where am I? There I am, cross street, time of day, and then I'll maybe sit down and doodle them real quick. and then move on. So most times I don't talk to them. It's just kind of a mental image.
The beauty of Sketchy People is that anybody could be in this book. You know, no matter what you're doing. Jack is like Batman. He's everywhere and nowhere, watching, waiting for somebody like me to do something awkward or wear something strange. Listen, I'm an awkward gal and I like to get all my weird awkwardness out when I think I'm alone, so I don't have to put that onto somebody else. So it's kind of my worst nightmare, but it's also super cool.
I always think it'll exhaust itself, but it hasn't yet. And I think I'm already getting material for the 4th book, and it's just like they just keep appearing. Everybody's out there, and that's what I like about people watching, is that it's not so much sometimes what they wear, it's sometimes what they say. I think the hardest thing about the project is, I could do a sketch of somebody, and it's loose, it's scribbly, it's quick. What the final output is it's a one shot only on pen. So I don't do any pencil layer. It is just, I'm a glutton for punishment, and I will just go with pen right away. And so if I make a mistake, start over. So I could get to the end of a drawing and go, might not like that one so much. So here's a sample of, didn't like it, didn't like it, liked it.
I'd like to interject here and say that I can't even do crossword puzzles in pen, so I was very impressed.
Yeah, I think the very first time I realized I need to draw somebody where I was and where they were, I was on the Max train, and it was a gentleman playing a video game on his phone, and what he said and kind of how he was moving, I was just mesmerized by him, and I'm like, I gotta draw this person. I got to work and I sketched him out real quick, and then I was like, yeah, I was on the Max train, this was the time of day, and then I saw somebody else, and I was like, drew them, and then I was like, I think we got something here. So once I started to get a body of work, my population of sketchy people just started to grow, and now we're on to book 3 now. I saw Cesar at Pioneer Cross Square. If I saw Cesar and Larry at like 2 p.m. with people around, there's nothing really weird about that. But I was walking through Pioneer Cross Square, and it's like 11:45 at night, and nobody is around. And I'm like, who is this guy? What is this llama? And then I draw him and cover the book, and here we go. So this Sunday, April 14th, noon to 2, Bridge City Comics on Mississippi. You can come by, pick up year 3, and special guest Cesar is going to be there. So hug a llama, get some comics, help keep Portland sketchy. You can follow me on Instagram at SketchyPeoplePDX. If you can't make the show, kentcomics.com/shop. That'll get you all of my books.
You heard that right, folks. On Sunday, April 14th, from noon to 2 p.m. at Bridge City Comics, there's going to be a party to celebrate the release of Sketchy People Year 3. And Cesar, the no drama llama, will be there, and you can give him a hug and buy some comics. Here's me hugging Cesar with just unbridled joy. It is dumb how much joy this llama brings to me, but he's just so darn cute, and his handler, Larry McCool, is super cool as well. So you're not going to want to miss it. What is better than a llama and comics? Very few things. So make sure that you're there. I'm going to be there. My lovely mother is going to be there, all the way from Florida. Come say hi to us, and say hi to Jack, and say hi to Cesar, and get some comics. It'll be a really, really fun time. But that's all I have for you this week. And as we move forward through the month, I'm looking forward to reading more locally created comics. So if you have any suggestions for any, you should drop them in the comments below. I want to hear about what I should be reading, what you're liking, all that stuff. I want this to be a collaborative effort, if at all possible. But I will see you guys next week. Same-ish time, same place. And until then, this has been KGW's Comic Pick of the Week. It's really hot in here, and I'm concerned you can see my upper lip sweat. Look at the camera.